Okay. I think we are here, everyone. I am not sure. Hi, my name is Eric. I like to test new technology. And today, folks, we are testing the brand spanking new Rumble Studio. And it is in beta. So beta means that Eric is going to be scrambling. Yes, I'm talking about myself in the third person, trying to figure out what's going on. But I think everyone here loves
Rumble and YouTube are up. Both Rumble and YouTube are up.
Okay, Rumble, YouTube are up. Locals failed. I don't know about X. Can somebody look at X and check my profile? I love new technology. I want to see Rumble succeed. I want to see Rockfin succeed and Odyssey succeed and everybody succeed. And this is so cool, but it's kind of a reverse. Can I pin this comment? Pin? Look at that. Folks, that is a Rumble chat on the screen.
All right, baby.
Nice.
This is the first time I've ever been able to do that, but here's the crazy thing. I can do that with Rumble for this, but I cannot do it for YouTube because they're not connected in like StreamYard or Restream or any of the others. So hopefully that's coming soon. But those of you who are leaving super chats on locals, I will do my best. I will have to read them out loud, kind of like I did with the Rumble rants or locals tips. I just wanted to let you know. And the locals connection failed on this one, which is really unfortunate.
I wasn't seeing anything on X either.
Nothing on X as of yet either. Okay, so it is what it is. This is extremely new. And I do appreciate everybody for indulging. So how is everybody doing? Dave?
I am doing well, just recovering from Thanksgiving. I had a lot of nap time and turkey. So now I'm ready to hit the ground running again.
All right, fantastic. And now I'm going to go right into Sean, because I think, Sean, you said that there's some crazy things going on this week with Delphi and some other stuff. And I didn't know if you wanted to kick off and lead on that.
Yeah, no, we can start there. I know Steve's been covering it too, but yeah, there's
Bye.
so the sacred this mystery transcript of this secret proceeding before the hearing that we were all trying to cover happened, and it got released. And I know Steve was talking about this, and I mentioned it on here before. The reasons why the judge did this are going to come out, and they're going to be really stupid. And I wasn't disappointed. It was really bad. The judge said, "Well, I'm disqualifying you because you're bad." She doesn't actually say what they've done specifically with any level of particularity. When a judge is trying to establish the record in a case, they normally cite to exactly, you made allegations in these filings that were inaccurate or that they were false. And normally a judge would put those in what you said and did. Getting through the whole discovery issue where the discovery got leaked, which once again, that's, okay, they admitted like they had nothing to do with it. It was an accident. And then she gets through all of that and says, "Oh, and therefore I deem you incompetent counsel," which is very interesting because there's an actual standard for ineffective assistance of counsel laid out by the Supreme Court. And it's in a case called Strickland v. Washington. And they state, had their conduct been different, the case would turn out differently. And nothing they've done so far would have, had this not occurred or had they not done something, would have altered the trajectory of the case at this point. I mean, attorneys falling asleep in the middle of trials has been deemed not to be ineffective assistance of counsel. So what these guys have done is far from it. And Steve and I were talking, these two attorneys that Richard Allen has, these guys have done, what we'd expect every attorney to do, but will not do. I mean, these guys have gone above and beyond. I mean, it's truly impressive what they've done. I mean, I'm not going to say they're doing the Lord's work, but they are doing, I mean, he's got the best defense you could ever imagine at this point. And then the judge boots him off, and she gives this awful reasoning that's laid out. And yeah, I mean, this judge has completely destroyed the case.
Did they
I don't know
file
how
a new appearance when they were first removed, quote, removed?
Yes, and then she said, "Sorry, I'm not letting you on." And I'm very curious to see how even if she gets removed from the case, because I think she should. And at this point, she's also gotten medical reasons, which if reading through the transcript, that's what I had done too, I'd be, calling in sick and saying my tummy hurt as well. Case recovers from here because at this point it's nationally known. I mean, people all over the country know about it. Like, how is this guy going to get a fair trial? Knowing all this has happened, and I just don't know her reasoning here. I mean, this just reeks of this isn't abnormal for her. I'm assuming this is how she normally operates, which really makes me concerned for the people in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that have to deal with her because, good Lord, I was not impressed with what I read. I'm not sure if Steve was, but that's where I'm at with it. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens from here, though.
I mean, if she uses it as an excuse to bow out, as was said in the YouTube chat, I'm right there with it, but there still probably should be some follow-up in her conduct. Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they have, a judicial tenure committee or something along those lines needs to do some sort of follow-up.
Yeah.
I didn't see, of course, anything that made me think they deserved to be thrown off the case. And she was kind of just threatening them with that in this secret in-chambers hearing and say, but, if you withdraw, we don't have to do all that. And then it ends up happening that they, she pressures them to that point. Yeah. But then they come back. And like Dave said, they entered in another appearance or intention to continue representing and said they do it pro bono. So they're basically privately retained at that point. And she said, I won't even look at what you're saying, guys, because you're out. I disqualify you. And I don't think she did, Sean, in that second hearing at the end of the month, actually put on the record why they're being disqualified, which regardless, I don't think those things support disqualification in the case remotely.
No, she didn't. And I read through the transcript on Monday night to my locals people. I read through the whole thing. She basically admits, these guys had no knowledge that they were going to get this thrust upon them. And, there's due process considerations for Richard Allen and, his rights. But the attorneys also, they have the right to respond if you're attacking them, threatening them with, removing them from a case. I mean, they had no time to prepare. They were not ready for this. They thought the judge was just thinking about an issue, and she just shows up, and it's really, the language is creepy. She's like, I don't want to do this, but if you make me, I'll do it. And it's like, I don't want to hit you, but I'll do it if I have to. And, it's really how it comes across.
It hurts me more than
slipping into something that we talked about sometimes, and that Dave's brought my mind back around to, which is the concept of proximate cause. And it's not strictly applicable here, but note that the guy who took pictures of the evidence in the defense attorney's office and distributed those, he's been arrested. Okay, so for conversion, and the defense counsel cooperated in that investigation. That's how they got the evidence really to get all the probable cause they needed to arrest him. So here's an intentional criminal act by somebody to steal evidence from a defense team, and then the defense team is thrown off the case for that. So, you might be able to fault them, and maybe you could, for not securing the evidence better, but here's a guy who was willing to commit a criminal act, essentially, at least that's what he's been arrested for, to take copies of this evidence, and they get thrown off the case for it. And Rozzi, it wasn't even his office, and Rozzi's thrown off the case. Rozzi was not even there, not even in the same town, and he even said to the judge, could you see a scenario where if you do disqualify Baldwin, you let me stay on the case because I wasn't connected to this? And she said, nope, you're both going.
And the interesting part about this is I covered a story last night talking about this. The guy who got arrested actually confessed the entire thing. He said, Attorney Baldwin was on the phone in another office, and I snuck in to where I shouldn't have been, and I started taking pictures. So, I mean, it's clearly not even like he showed, like, hey, man, check all this gory stuff out I got going on. Isn't this cool? The guy literally, I mean, short of breaking in, did this, and that was provided to the judge. Judge was even aware of it, and the judge still says, I don't care. Which that is really, really concerning at that point, because what more are they supposed to do? Start frisking everyone when they leave the office? Like, that's
was this an employee of the firm? I didn't really get the
it was his former it was his friend. And I think
he had worked there in the past, but he was still on good terms with them and was in and out of the office pretty on a frequent basis or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we invite and it's not clear what they were going to talk about at that point, but yeah, the guy snuck in and took his pictures and left. It's just,
well, what's interesting is that the
travesty.
pictures that were released don't necessarily go against the defense position. They in some way could bolster the defense position. So when you're looking at the conduct of the attorney, let's assume the attorney was somehow involved or negligent in some way. You're still, I mean, it's an act that doesn't hurt the defendant, could potentially help the defendant. So I have a lot of problems with that all around.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make me angry now.
No, this case is, there's that issue, and then, the Supreme Court has allowed Richard Allen and his attorneys to respond to the judge's initial rulings about the filings, where the judge said, "Well, you didn't object to things properly," and they pointed out you've got multiple obligations under the rules of court for your state in Indiana to protect the records, to keep things going, to keep public access available. And then they also pointed out, and once again, this is where the judge is blaming these parties, but she's the one causing the problems. Oh, you didn't file anything. Well, you're not accepting my filings. And he tried to have his attorneys file, but she wouldn't accept it. And if Richard Allen had tried to file it on his own, she would say, "Oh, well, that's hybrid representation. I'm not going to accept your filing. You can't represent yourself, Mr. Allen." So this judge is just making a joke out of the whole thing. And I don't know what her deal is, if she's having a mental issue or she's in over her head or what, because I'm still not on the idea that she's involved with this onus thing. I mean, that's a whole separate, factor.
Well, if you want to go down the conspiracy theory, somebody in that organization may or may not have done something to her food, and that's why she's in the hospital.
Well,
no, that's the first thing I saw when I saw it on Twitter. I was like, oh my God, they're going to say that there's all this conspiracy now and all this.
Yeah.
She's been fairly sideways with the defense from the beginning, though.
Yeah.
And that's my opinion.
Oh, yeah. No, she has. And I love how she basically treats the state as though they have no, they're without stain at this point. It's like, we're the farthest thing from it. So, this woman, I'm disgusted at this point with how she did this.
Is this kind of her MO? Is she very much pro-state judge? Because there are judges out there like that.
This isn't even pro-state. This is a judge who does whatever she wants because she's judge.
Okay. I will say that I don't know what, obviously I don't know what her general thing is, but she has been reversed before when she refused to give even a 1-day continuance to defense in a criminal case when the prosecution unloaded some new allegations that fairly to the state, maybe they just found out about, but the defense said, well, we need at least time to go over this and see whether we need more witnesses to analyze it. We need a day at least. And she said, we're starting the case now. I don't care. And, so that she was reversed for that, and the conviction, of course, thrown out. So, and that's the thing here. Even if you think Allen is the guy who did it, you don't want the judge acting out of bounds, because if you do finally get a verdict, you're probably going to get reversed. So if you think he's innocent, it's terrible. And if you think he did it, I also think it's terrible. The judge needs to play inside the rules.
Right. And this is something that I'm actually working on a class for our office on, is that the defense attorneys really do control the timing of cases. Because if we aren't prepared, we can basically force the judge to continue a case. And if we are prepared, we can force a trial. So those two, the timing and the direction, and judges and prosecutors, and usually those are one and the same, hate that we have that power. And so they always attack it. But it is true, at least in Florida, that the timing of the trials are generally dictated by the defense. And like you said, I'm not familiar with this particular judge, but judges they think that they can do anything. And there are certain rights, there are certain things that the defense does get. There's certain powers that we do have, and that's one of them.
The interesting thing, which I'm sure you guys all know, if you go looking for appellate cases on this, usually if you see the defense being accused of playing games, trying to substitute back-end counsel or switching counsel, it's to get a delay. And the court's like, no, this has been long enough. The case here, though, is that Allen's attorney said, if you take both of us off, this case goes out another year. And if you leave at least one of us on, we can get on with the trial, because the trial was set for January and that's gone. So here the defense was, like what Steve is saying, the defense was actually saying, let's go ahead and have this trial. And by the judge removing these attorneys, that also creates the issue of this trial going out a year, which is bad for the defendant if he's innocent, and bad for the victims and the families and everybody. I mean, ultra delayed trials are not good. So it's the reverse of the normal situation. The judge actually precipitated a delay by doing this.
When is the trial scheduled for now?
I don't think it has one now. I think it's no schedule now.
It's set for October of 2024 tentatively.
Okay, so about a year then. Okay, cool. Yeah.
His defendant might be dead by then.
No, there's a concern. It sounds like his health is really deteriorating. There's letters coming out from people in the prison, saying it's awful there, which, based on what we've heard so far, wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, Richard Allen might die before he even has a chance to clear his name.
And I think that's the point, that he's in prison, right? He's not in jail in a normal situation. He's actually in a prison in solitary or something like that.
Why is he in solitary? Did they ever explain that?
Protection.
Protection from what?
Well, because if he's in prison, he's being held there because they can't hold him at a local jail. But also, since he hasn't been convicted, putting him in with convicted inmates, I do think presents an issue of, well, now I think there is a bit of an issue. They have an obligation to protect him because he hasn't been convicted yet. So I think that's why he's in protective custody at this point.
But, if you can have Koberger, who, has got a lot of bad press against him, he's in a jail. I mean, people are normally in a jail. So even if there's media. So I wish the judge had visited that a little more towards his side of things when that was filed, but she did not. She said that, she's going to let it go like it is. And so he's still sitting in prison.
Yeah. She's acting very much like Judge Newman. She's never met a state's motion she doesn't like. So.
This is bad judges. I'm assuming a locally elected judge, right? And this is why people need to pay attention to these judges that you guys elect.
Yeah, I do have the feeling, though, the way she's conducted this case so far, judicial conferences around the country will be using her as an example of, please don't do this.
Yeah.
That's a legit question when you said you got to be careful of which judges you do elect. Out of curiosity, does anybody really pay attention, or do judges pretty much get in for life because of name recognition, in the sense of if they never, unless there's some huge controversy and backlash against a judge, I can't see where they wouldn't just stay in there forever, because people might have heard of their name in an article or something and like, I don't know, check, it's the name I recognize. Am I wrong about this? Or
I would say, I'd say that I wish that judges, it was more competitive. Generally, you are correct that it's very hard. Once they get in, it's very hard to pry them out of their position. Now, at the trial level in Florida, we do have successful challenges occasionally to trial level judges, and I'm all for it. They need to be afraid of their position. They need to be ruling. On the other hand, appellate judges, there has been, I think, one known case of a removal of a judge from the appellate branch in the history of Florida. So basically, and that person was corrupt and was removed for criminal acts. So it's impossible to get somebody off the appellate court, and therefore you get absolute power corrupting absolutely. In my opinion, they sit on their hands. They don't rule. They blow off legal arguments that should be addressed in writing. And now on the trial level, there you can challenge, but it's tough too, because there's this vindictiveness that if you run against a judge, are you going to get unfavorable rulings going into the future? So there's a lot of trickiness about the whole election of judges thing. And judging, good judges are precious, but bad judges are a disaster. And we get all of them, as in human failings, just like in lawyers or people or anybody else. You're gonna get a range, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I typically experience is they will be appointed by the governor because of a retirement or something like that in sort of a midterm, and then they'll run for re-election or election the first time, but it'll put incumbent. And most of the people, if it says incumbent next to it, just check that box. Well, all is good. I'll just vote for the same person. And so there's no political party denoted for the trial judges or appellate judges or anyone, but it'll always say incumbent, and the incumbents will always get reelected. So if you get an appointment in Michigan, you're going to have a job essentially for life, and unless there's some big controversy that blows up, and those happen once every 5 years.
Yeah.
You just said something significant about flagging the person as incumbent. Wouldn't that be the first change that should take place? Is remove that. Let's not give people anymore, and then randomize. So if there are multiple names, put them in a random order. If possible in ballots, that would be ideal. Where every other ballot, if let's say there's 2 candidates, we're just printing in every other order. So that way there's no assumption. Or if it's just in alphabetical order every time. So some sort of an element to where it doesn't cue off people that, let me just go with the whatever's there.
The order is randomized on all the ballots, but it still tags them as incumbent.
Well,
and sometimes it is a partisan election in some states. North Carolina has that. So
it looks like Indiana does partisan elections. I just Googled it.
Well, we have nonpartisan elections in Florida. However, we have local political parties, namely the Republicans, that have been sending out little Republican ballots with the nonpartisan election selections already made. So when you come in, they'll hand you a little voting card. So I don't know really if it makes a difference one way or another.
Yeah.
Can you define a partisan election before we get
Democrat, Republican?
Yeah, it actually lists the parties. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And in Michigan, there is none. And I see AYU, I don't know how you pronounce that, AYU in the YouTube chat is saying, I never vote for the judges. I have zero information about them, and it's very frustrating. I literally, and I promote this, I call them. I call the candidates, and I ask them questions. They all have candidate websites, and I say, hey, I'm interested. I have a few questions for you about, this or that. And if you can't call them, or for whatever reason you don't have the time, try to sit in on their court. Sit in on an arraignment day and see how they handle the defendants on an arraignment day. And there'll be bond setting and things like that. You can get a sense. You just sit in there for a morning.
But if you don't have that time, you don't have that
time.
Yeah, find a lawyer that you respect, who's practicing and who's aligned with you politically, and ask them for their guidance on those judges on retention elections. Like I always vote no, do not retain on every retention election, because the thing is that the retention is usually 80% or 90%. So if there's a problem judge, the people in the know are going to be voting do not retain. So you want to pile on that do not retain, because in Florida at least the lack of retention is so great. I mean, the retention is basically 100%. So if you have a chance of knocking a judge off on a retention election, vote no on any retention. That's my thing. Vote them out.
And what I was going to say though is the biggest problem though with judges, when you're like the average voter, they're going to look at it and say, "Well, are they putting bad guys in jail? Good, that's what I want." That's what it comes down to. So that's why you see a lot of judges are former. Like, I'm a former prosecutor. It's like, oh, people are like, okay, great, he's going to deal with bad guys. Like, I'm a former defense attorney, and they're going to be like, I don't know about that.
I wonder, though, with all the January 6th things, if the prosecutors' reputations have not been tainted. It seems to me that we're following into this prosecutorial tyranny, and the conservative side, of which I am a part, has a lot more skeptical towards prosecutors nowadays.
Stephen, yes, but then we have plenty of Soros DAs that help tip the scale going the other way, and overwhelmingly go like, okay, these corrupt leftists, I can't see them, because the right generally likes law and order. That's just a traditional thing. Conservatives, Republicans, whatever, law and order people. By nature. And while, they despise that, that's DC. We're now talking about their locality, like, oh, well, that's DC, but what about here? That person, they're law and order. Okay. So even if you don't flag it, if they're known as a law and order judge, I think they're going to definitely pick up support, at least from the conservative side.
The problem with the law, like, listen to maybe even local police officers. I was in court the other day, and there were a couple of police officers that were chit-chatting. One has left the force and has become a magistrate, and he's the one that signs off on the warrants. And the police officer that was still on the force had asked him about, do you have any special requirements for your warrants and things like that? And I was like, I chimed in. I was like, yeah, probably the affidavit, all the facts that you need to establish. And he's like, yeah, I do return a few, but I'm not like this other judge. And he was like, is that a T or is that an A? I'm like, so you guys are complaining about a judge who's actually taking the warrant thing seriously and is rejecting things if they're improperly submitted. And they're complaining about it. So maybe even, cue in on that a little bit. If there's a police officer or a district attorney or a prosecutor that loves a judge, maybe take a second look at that one.
And I think if your jurisdiction, you look at it's very jurisdictional. So, some states like in Florida, we need to lean against the law and order a bit. But if you're in San Francisco, you might want to go the other way. I think it depends a lot on your locality. How, what is the problem coming from? I will say, I will relate this. I just got home from a long vacation. We were driving through, I think it was Glenn County, Georgia, or it was just on the border of Florida. And there was a random police stop. I think this is the one where the Aubrey case was. And there was a check. They stopped us on the highway with a bunch of police cars. And they said they were doing basically random DUI checkpoint stop. I don't think that's legal in Florida. Is that legal in Georgia? And I'm like, that's illegal. Of course, my wife, she's driving and she's like, okay, here. But, they stop you. They want your card. They check your thing. I'm like, we're being detained. I want to be free on my way. And so the thing is if you're in a county that's very tight-fisted, you might want to go a little bit the other way, right? But ultimately, a good judge is one who judges every case based on the law and the facts and is not pro-defense or pro-state one way or the other. That's what you're looking for in a judge. Honesty, right?
No, I was just going to say, no, that's exactly what you want. And if there's a judge that the police are complaining about, was kind of my point, because they're making making the officer jump through hoops for a warrant requirement, that's probably a good judge.
Well, isn't there a simple test? If you don't know which way they're going to rule, they're likely someone who pays attention to the law.
Yeah.
If you know every time you're like, oh, it's that judge, it's going to be this, then that tells you everything. I would feel really quickly.
They're not doing their job there. Yeah.
Yeah. Super chat came in again, just to let everybody know, I can't surface super chats on this because for some crazy reason, Rumble only favors Rumble chats, if you will, like so, but they do not actually work with YouTube chats. So this is new software. I'm playing with it, so I've got to reach in and read out the super chats, kind of like I've been doing with Rumble rants before. But Jen D is saying, I confess to being a Floridian who just voted to retain incumbent judges. Now I vote not to retain all judges, even local judges I am familiar with. There you go. So that's the Gosney school of voting. And Nicholas Stero said, politicians left or right only care if we commit crimes, not if themselves do it. That's why Congresses only abide by rules or aims. So,
yes.
Thank you both.
I was looking at our panel here, and I think all of our panel here are practicing lawyers. Is that correct?
I'm not a lawyer at all.
Right, I know, but I mean our panel, not our host.
Yeah.
Southern law, potentially criminal, and MLS making law simple are all basically working, practicing lawyers. So that's kind of
true.
Yes,
true. We don't have the Viva Fries in here or the Nick Requietas in here, right?
Right. Yes.
The Nick Rekieta hopefully will be in here. Those who paid attention to the thumbnail will notice that he's semi-translucent because you never know if the ghost of Nick Rekieta or
I'm gonna text him right now because I'm gonna say, where the hell are you?
I'm gonna start sending him a link to every stream that I host, just every one, and we'll see if he ever appears.
All right, somebody's saying my mic is hot. Is it hot to you guys? Is it really overdone?
It sounds balanced to me in the stream.
Rant or chats, please let me know if my mic is overpowering. I don't have any controls, and it is something that I need to note.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is we were looking to see if there are any microphone settings where we can adjust our volume before this. I didn't find any.
No, I don't see any there.
Chat is saying audio sounds good, and all the chat says audio is good. So I think we're good.
Maybe somebody just hates hearing my voice. You know how a particular tone, you hear it and you're like, ugh, it's just too loud. You piss me off. You're just too loud. Shut up. So that could be it. Okay, so what other cases have been going crazy this week? Steve Southern Law, you're going to be quiet and never say anything if I don't cue you up. So what's going on, man?
Well, what caught me as interesting, and then I did a little stream on it, and got a lot of good feedback from people chatting on it. Is in the Kowalski case, of course, where they got a $250 million judgment. Quite naturally, the defense is going to file the motions that they can, and you have to look at them, just like you said, to see whether they have merit or not. But one of those was, hey, we need to throw this out because juror number 1 engaged in misconduct in communicating and or researching about the case while it was in progress, and the primary allegations are the theory that he was talking with his wife about it, because she was apparently extremely active online during the trial, commenting on Law and Lumber's channel, some other channels and things like that, attending the trial, and she was completely Team Maya. And so they have filed this motion. Now,
a juror?
No, his wife. So now
okay.
here's the thing, though. His wife can say whatever she wants, and she can go to trial if she wants to. And the juror who has been talking about the case after the case is over, he can talk about the case when the case is over. So it's really about, okay, you have these things. What are you showing the judge that shows this communication you say occurred? And they have some examples where she's like, the LEO juror is going to be asking questions. The law enforcement juror is going to be asking questions. That's her husband. The jury is going to take a while to produce a result. But here's the thing, though. When they came back with their comment that they did, I thought they were going to take a while to. It's not like she said, my husband said they're going to be out for 2 more days, or I have an inside scoop. She was making comments about things that a lot of people were making comments about. So none of that's a smoking gun. So I don't think it was wise to do it. But on the other hand, I would be surprised if the judge even calls this jury in for a hearing. I remember in the Charlie Adelson case, the jury created a chat group before they went into deliberation. The defense tried to bring that up, and the judge didn't even want to listen to it. So I don't think the judge is looking for reasons to overthrow this. So I'd be surprised if the judge brings it in. But if you ask me to bet money whether they talked about it or not, I'm not sure that I wouldn't think that's, that maybe they did because of how enthusiastic she was. But speculation is not evidence. And while you can draw inferences from what they say, I don't find that the comments were such that you can say, well, she only got this information from her husband.
Well, my question on that, and because I did I have a really good connection with a juror misconduct researcher named Mary Rose Peterson, who is an expert. She basically reviews and looks for juror misconduct, and she's done about 80 different cases on this. And but my question is there any allegation by it within the document that connects the wife of the juror that there was any communication at all with the juror? Because see, then the question is, do they even get a right to a hearing? If you can't allege that such communication occurred, they may be able to dismiss that. They might be able to just rule against it without even a hearing. If you can allege that there was some basis that there was a communication, then you've got a right to a hearing. You would interview the witness, maybe interview the juror, and they would decide at that point. Because if the witness comes and says, no, we didn't communicate, boom, it's over. So
but they lie in bed together every night, Steve. They must have talked about this case.
No. Nope.
I know. But that's the assumption.
Well, you can assume it, but you can't prove it, right? Isn't that the factor?
But can you even allege it?
Well, and so this is the thing. So they're saying, hey, she was even commenting on YouTube channels after the day was over and the juror was at home. She's making comments about the case. So they're showing there's some smoke there. But where they try and make this connection is saying the comments that she makes is information that she could have only gotten from her husband. Now, she didn't comment, my husband told me this, or they had, something secret that occurred. She's making a general observation about the case that a lot of people make. To me, that's not enough to say, well, she must have gotten this information from her husband. I don't see that.
Well, and the case was televised as well.
Yes.
Well, and I guess the other thing too at this point is, if this was a criminal case, I'm still not, like, as much as I'd love to, if this was a case where a guy got convicted, I would love to hope, and I'd be screaming from the rooftops that, the court needs to get involved and maybe overturn the verdict, but there's a very good likelihood it's not going to. So, and if that's the case in a criminal trial, the odds of this in a civil case, I mean, you know, the only thing Johns Hopkins better start writing on is a checkbook at this point. Don't quit writing the
Right.
motions.
Well, there
this
might be
is
some
catch that
grounds
check.
for remitters and things like that.
Yeah.
well,
Reduction. And
except that yes, that's true. That's true.
Yes, but I mean, they need to get on that. This stuff here, I think, is a little bit of a waste of time.
They
I
also,
understand
I
what
think
they're
it's
doing.
it's all this is negotiation fodder, right? So it's like, okay, so I owe you 500 million or whatever the number was, right? How about if you take 100 million right now? I mean, you know, so would you take that? I don't know. I'll catch you a check right now for 100 million. Let's just be done with it and close everything.
yeah, that's exactly what they're going to do. This is going to get, like I said it at the time of the verdict, this is going to get settled. There's going to be money exchanged for a lot less than this judgment, and it's all going to go away, and there's going to be no more appeals, and you're not going to hear about that, most likely. So that's how this case is going to end up. And yeah, maybe that's what they're doing. They're trying to set that up so it's easier to swallow. You know, you could spend the next 2.5, 3 years in appellate court jurisdiction, or you can take a much smaller check now and be done with this.
Okay. I don't know. I'm hoping that some of you have been reading up on this. I've only been watching the headlines, but let's talk about the thermonuclear lawsuit from Elon Musk against our favorite hack organization, Media Matters of America, as well as I think Rumble is jumping on board, or they're threatening to. All kinds of creators are throwing money into some sort of fund or something. I don't know all the details. Have any of you been looking into that, reading any of that lawsuit, or know anything?
I started following it early on, and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the lawsuit essentially it started as a defamation suit regarding advertisements being posted with certain political or non-political content, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the allegation is that the ads were being manipulated in such a way that they were.
Well, what was happening was that there was this Media Matters, and there was a collusion between these organizations. It's actually kind of looking at the sausage being made on all of this propaganda media complex that we are been subjected to in the last, say, 10 years, where the media and the internet companies and this thing, they all get in this little loop, and they point and point and point, and they create false narratives. And they do that by saying, well, I'm just reporting what this media did. And the way they did it was they put like neo-Nazi content up next to other content to make it appear as if there's a relationship with the two, and then they report the relationship. And so it's a self-created ecozone that is being attacked. And I am really hopeful that this type of lawsuit will disrupt this type of false media narrative that we are seeing played out, the propaganda that has been so effective at subduing our populace into sheep. I really would hope that we can break up that kind of incestuous relationship, and Musk is just the guy to do it. So, because he's got an interest here now with Twitter, right?
Well, on that, to clarify, because I've read a couple accusations. One is kind of what you described, where I take tweets and I take known toxic figures and I take ads and I Photoshop it together as if it's in the timeline, which I think would fall under the word fraud. Yeah. But I don't know. Now, the second thing, though, I have read, and I have read conclusively people stating this happened from Twitter or whatever, Media Matters is gaming the algorithm to a degree where they will say, okay, I create a new sock puppet account and I follow only hate accounts, just like a whole slew of hate accounts. And then I just keep hammering and refreshing and refreshing and refreshing and refreshing many hundreds to thousands of times. I don't know how often, until finally, all of a sudden an ad pops in and the filters break down. Now, because of, that's only people they follow, things like this, I think they've potentially found a way to game the algorithm to do this. But the question is this. I know I'm long-winded, but if they did that, and it is using Twitter and the algorithm, and they surface it, no matter what their intentions were, how deceptive they are, etc., technically, they did get an ad to appear next to that content on Twitter, black and white. That's a pretty strong defense, in my opinion.
I think so, but I think the issue is, and from what I've heard, some of these accounts were older accounts, and they set it up so it was only meant to follow where you get this objectionable material. So like if you're running around following Nick Fuente, or if he's still on Twitter, you're following somebody like that. I forget if somebody already mentioned this, but when you're setting it up that way, it's already been set up in advance to get this result. So I think Elon's also claiming that their metadata and their statistics show only 1 in like 500 million people would ever see this, and
That's true.
there's only 7 billion people on Earth. So you're telling me that these guys literally manufactured a situation where maybe only 4 or 5 people in the world could ever see this, but they'd have to do everything like literally Media Matters did, but
here's my point. That's true. You're right.
It's their representation issue, though, of like, oh my God, we just found, like, I was clicking on cat pictures and it found Nazi. It's like, but that's not really how you did it, though. And I think that runs into the defamation, but their misrepresentation of how they did it.
But if they did do it, and this is my question, like I said, I want to see Media Matters hammered. That's my personal thing. I would like to see Elon Musk do to Media Matters what Peter Thiel with Hulk Hogan did against Gawker.
Yeah.
I would love to see Elon Musk own Media Matters. That would be a beautiful day, kind of like Scientology owns an anti-cult network. Did you know that one?
No, do they?
Yeah.
Yes, they do. They sued it and they actually own it. I think it's a Cult Awareness Network or something else. Correct me if I'm wrong. So people call in and they're like, I need help with a cult. And they have a Scientologist giving them help with any cult, except I'm sure one of them maybe is represented better than others. It's a good way to go. I would love to see Elon Musk own Media Matters. That would be hilarious. And he could, like treat it as the community notes and then make it squared away. That would just be amazing. But I circle back around to the same question. If Media Matters through whatever means possible, and yes, it's completely disingenuous, they surface that content and then they write an article and say, well, look at that. There's a Nazi ad next to my tweet. Apple, this company, that company, blah, 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 blah. Now, they didn't tell Apple to remove their ads. They didn't tell people to do it. So, again, I know it's snaky, but you're all lawyers. I'm going to go to Southern Law. Tell me if technically they can be sued or if that's a pretty strong defense.
Can they be sued? Oh yeah, you can almost always get sued, baby. Because if there's nothing else, there's usually some kind of Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act where you show there's a deceptive act in it affecting commerce. Here's the shady thing somebody did, and you're off to the races. That's a popular cause of action, at least in this state, and you get treble damages and all that. And I think what they're trying to say here, at least, is that there was an interference with contract with these advertisers. Mm-hmm. So if there was deception in that, that's going to be the avenue of the claim. Now the defense, we'll have to see it. They're certainly going to say, look, all we did was show a legitimate result. We didn't say it wasn't rare, but I don't know what they did say, and I don't know how they put it. If it was material that they omitted the fact that they manipulated these accounts to generate an extremely rare result, but then they started doing it a lot or showing it a lot to make it look like this is something that's happening to people, then that could be interference with contracts. I have not read the lawsuit, that's for sure, and I don't know that there's been time for an answer or anything even to be filed yet. So I'd want to read it before I'd say, but I'm sure you can cook up the lawsuit, that's for sure.
Hey, Joe, thank you for letting me know in the chat that you were backstage. There's a scrolling bar on the bottom of this screen that shows participants, and you were to the right of the arrow, so I had no idea you were here.
That's how far right you are, Joe. You're so far right, It doesn't even show up on Rumble.
There you go. All right, now fix your mic.
Yeah, you have to hit that little weird icon, Joe.
The little mic icon.
Oh, and we are also on Twitter. I will note that we're broadcasting on Twitter also.
Yes, can you guys retweet that, exit, post it, whatever?
I did, yes.
Thank you all. I appreciate that. Trying to get some traction there to bring people into wherever they want to go. But okay, so circling back around, you're right, Steve. You brought up a good point I didn't even think of with lawfare. Anybody can sue anybody if they can find anything, right?
Pretty much.
Well, I think the problem is with that, and we have something similar here in Michigan, but I think the problem is that they would have to show the fraud angle and they would have to show the intent. And so
but
it's
you
not
can
an
allege
easy-
you can allege intent. The key
Well, you
is
can
to get
allege
into
intent.
discovery. Then you just got to get into discovery. Once
as
you're
a-
discovery,
yeah, no, but
I
as a
actually read
practical
through this
sense,
complaint, by the way, in case you're
to
wondering.
show the intent,
Oh, you read it.
it's
Good.
just you're gonna have a lot of work. And it's not a clear cut thing, right? You're interpreting a lot when you come, unless there's a smoking gun email, which I doubt it.
Okay, well, my quick question, then I definitely want Joe to dig into the lawsuit. Could it still be a strategy? You've heard the term FU money, right? Adam Carolla has a term where he calls it F me money. And the difference is this. FU money is, I've got a lot of money, I can screw you over, blah, 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 right? F me money is, I have so much money, I will lose millions of dollars, not even think about it, go in the hole just to burn your ass. And if anybody has F me money, that's Elon Musk. And what I understand is he is not only going after Media Matters as a whole, he's targeting board of directors members, etc., personally. And so even if you don't have a strong case, can you have a major effect in lawfare of just continuing to hit them where they have to pay to defend themselves for so long that it's harmful and scary, and they just finally say, okay, you know what, I'm out. I'm just not dealing with this anymore.
I hope so.
You're on your own, Media Matters. And I just wanted to ask you all, before Joe gets into the legit case, could this also be part of the strategy? Just to, you know what, hell with you, I'm going to salt the fields. I will use this cudgel on your ass.
I hope so.
Well, that's certainly Elon's perception towards litigation, all the way back from when he had the case, the defamation case, where he went after the diver in the Thai case, and then talking about building a kick-ass street-based litigation team at Tesla and Twitter and all that he wanted in-house litigators to really go after people. He has a high risk tolerance, and I have no doubt that he views litigation as something to hit somebody with. He doesn't like getting hit with it either, but it's a tool, that's for sure, and he's going to use it.
Can I before we get too much into the law, I will say I will say that as a Floridian who's just north of the Space Center, I am saluting Mr. Elon Musk for the great things that he's done with SpaceX and the incredible launch of Starship that is getting under. It's like nobody even cares. That is an amazing thing that he is doing in Texas. And Elon Musk, he is a real modern day entrepreneur, a brilliant man, and I am a big fan. So before we get too much back into this lawfare thing, which is we're the lawyers and we're the lawyers den, we got to salute somebody who's actually a productive member of society and respect that.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
No, that's what you just said. Basically, you're giving thanks for Elon. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I actually read through this complaint on a local stream 2 days ago. So from what I recall, they're not suing the board. They're suing the author of the article and Media Matters. And what I liked about this case is that they, well, first of all, Elon, you want to talk about Elon being Elon. He tweeted out a lawsuit is going to be filed in court as soon as it opens tomorrow morning. Like, that's the way he worded it. And sure enough, that's what they did. And I got to tell you, for the fast work that they did, it seemed pretty effective. They named Media Matters. They named Hananoki, who's the author of the article. And what they detail in there is...
Hold on, Joe. Is it not possible? Because, I mean, this ad bit has been going on with Elon for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to bet that he's had a template lawsuit drawn up by a legal team, just getting ready for, okay, who am I going to target? Because Media Matters have been scumbags who've been doing this for a while. They did it against Rumble, Chris Pavlovsky or whatever, saying, hey, we're going after him. So it may not have been they just drafted this overnight. It may have been they put the final touches on it and they were just waiting. Let's see if they write another article. As soon as they do, here comes the hammer.
Could be. I mean, look, there's definitely litigants and law firms that do that is preparing for a lawsuit. Like, I would think, like, if Trump was properly prepared for all the fraud. They anticipated months in advance of the election that a template should have been created beforehand to just spell out basic facts that you don't have to repeat and come up with the same narrative over and over again for every new lawsuit. So yeah, there is such a thing as doing that, and that's considered, strategic litigation. I would say that it's not a very long complaint. It's only 15 pages. And what he did is this. First of all, he went to federal court and on a basis of diversity. And he basically said, we have our offices in California. We're incorporated in Nevada. The Media Matters is out in DC. The author lives out in Maryland. So we're going to sue in Texas, which was strategically the right thing to do. And I think that I would anticipate that Media Matters are going to certainly look to move venue and get it out of Texas and bring it to a jurisdiction that they would think would be far friendlier, like any of their where they are, Maryland, DC, I'm sure, or California. They would probably volunteer. We'll go to California, the home state of the defendant. We'll be happy to go there. But when they walk through the jurisdiction, how it is that, they're targeting everyone across the country, you could really have inserted any state in the union and it would have been equally applicable, which is why it's really hard to understand how perspectives that they'll have a weak ground to keep it in Texas. But even if they end up getting it transferred to California, this is a fairly strong suit. And the reason it's a fairly strong suit, and there's not that much template in there, they spell out what all the steps that they do to maintain the algorithm and maintain viewer security from finding stuff. And they give a little bit of a background as to how their algorithm works, and basically that it's set up based on who you follow and similar types of tweeters that you would like to follow. And that's what it recommends. And they basically talk about how the average follower has roughly 219 people that they follow, and that what Media Matters did was specifically targeted, and they worked hard to elicit the response that they did. And these are the steps that they took. They created a brand new account, and they waited more than 30 days. And they said the reason that they waited more than 30 days is because we have a security that we put into place that we're monitoring new accounts more during the first 30 days. So they specifically kept their account more than 30 days old. And what they did was they followed only 30 people, which is far less than what the average follower would follow in that time span. And the only parties that they followed were crazy, ultra right wing, like fanatical, like dangerous folk.
Actual Yahtzees,
actual
Spencers, and people like that,
and a handful of the largest corporate sponsors of Twitter who spend the most advertising on Twitter. That's all they followed, which is a very bizarre type of thing to follow, because it's not like there are some people who are fans of the Yahtzees. It's not like they'll be like, yeah, I need to follow. I got to follow David Duke and the KKK and Nabisco. That's what I got to like. That's the only things I'm following. So, and that they were specifically
hey, Yahtzees like breakfast too.
It was an IBM and Oracle and
IBM
has a good record, World War II connection. So that I'm just kidding.
Can I say I'm thankful for Joe. I am thankful for Joe. God bless you, Joe. You are on my thankful list.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you, brother. So
I have one question. I'm going to interrupt really quickly.
Yeah.
When we're discussing exactly what they did, and I mentioned that all before too, they found a way to game the algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to subpoena their emails all throughout Media Matters to find out, did you happen to have anybody like Yoel Roth who might say, hey, here's a way.
How'd you figure out how to trick it?
Yeah, or maybe some disgruntled Twitter engineer. Like, can we look at any emails mentioning algorithm and Twitter and sources? That would be very interesting. That maybe you could expand the lawsuit. Maybe there's a couple other people who could join the party. Any thoughts on that?
That's more of a layman's perspective. And a
Well,
classic,
yeah.
typical layman, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way at all.
Typical layman, man.
I don't
Get
know.
out of here, get out of
No.
here. Yeah.
What I mean by that,
It's a compliment.
I don't mean it in any way offensive. What I mean is that is you're thinking like we all humans. We're like, this is what I want to know. This is what like I'm curious about. Like I'm so curious about like who the other slime balls are. That's what I mean. But from a perspective of a litigator,
No. I'm also curious because if you figured out a way to game it, that would show that you're perpetrating it. Like they don't have a defense of saying, "Oh, I don't know, I just did it to see."
they don't have a defense anyway. They don't have. They have almost no defenses. I didn't get them. I'm working my way there. I have build up, but they really have like they're gonna struggle to come up with any kind of defense because what they said is we have 500 million monthly active users. And think about that freaking number. There's 8 billion people on the planet, and 1 in 16 are on Twitter at least once a month. That's astonishing. I mean, that's crazy influence. And he said there's only one in 500 million came up with the search results that they came up with. 1 in 500, meaning there is literally no other user account on the platform that ever had that result. And it's because they gained it that way. And even when they gained it that way, they explained their security measures. They're like, users are able to basically block people out and filter out who it is that they don't want. And the algorithm will naturally keep them away from other similar type sources. And companies who are advertising can if they wanted to, could say we don't want to be promoted anywhere near tweets that include any sort of language, so they can use a language filter to keep themselves away from the type of rhetoric that some fanatical crazy person might use. So those are the two measures they have there. And they said that account that they created was the only account in all of Twitter which saw what they saw, and they still had to, they actually saw that they had to refresh over and over and over and over again and to get more advertisers, because when you refresh it more, you get more fresh new advertisers. They said 15 times they hit refresh until they finally, by working the algorithm the way they did, managed to be the only one in 500 million which managed to bring up the result they had, took screenshots of it, and then basically said, this is what users find on Twitter. That is so they sued for tortious interference with contracts because they lost a ton of their advertisers. They lost so many tens of millions of dollars. This is probably a 9-figure suit when you go through all the advertising and revenue that they've lost. This is going to bankrupt Media Matters. I mean, it does because what they did.
You're making me more to be thankful for.
Yeah, what they purposely set this up and then went out there and basically said this is what users find when they go onto Twitter, and that this is as if this was organic when it was the most inorganic thing in the world, and the objective was to interfere with these contracts. That's why they did it. They wanted the result they had, and they even afterwards so stupidly doubling down on it and having follow-ups to their original article, even after the lawsuit was filed, follow-ups of these are the different companies which have canceled ever since they read our article, which basically explained about how how these companies are going to be linked together with these crazy Yahtzee right-wing type of organizations, like lunatics, that they actually admitting that they're to blame for it after they know that the only way this could have happened. I mean, think about, and they also had another result which they said 2 out of 500 million had this. There was like another fine that they had. So between those two fines, if you multiply the odds of the same account coming with 1 in 500 million and 2 in 500 million, it's literally 1 in quintillions that anyone would find what they found. And it's clear this is not something that you need to establish. Oh, you went to Yoel Roth. So this is why I was saying there was a layman's perspective, because you don't need to come to say, oh, it's only you. Here are all the other steps you took. It's obvious from the fact that they managed to rig these results that they had to have been killing themselves trying to figure out how do we do this and working on it for a long time. And then after they succeeded in it, doubling down on it and basically saying, look at what we did. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. This is just, so they sued for.
But they could do it. And that's like, I wish Nate was here because we've discussed it. You know, Nate and I offline, he's not able to make it, but they could do it. And the fact that they could do it means that there's something in the algorithm and they could just say, Whatever. Doesn't, I didn't say it wasn't rare. I
Right.
didn't say it wasn't. Somebody else in here said that. I didn't say it wasn't rare. I just said, look at this. Here's a bad account. Here's an Apple ad.
Right.
Tough titty. I don't care about all what you're talking about there. The fact is that Twitter allows me to do this, and it is therefore of risk. I can't help if Apple overreacted. I can't help if these people overreacted because I just shared the info. So how do you overcome that? And again,
the way to overcome that is they're bragging about how that's what happened. I mean, they're stupidly bragging about like these are all the companies that which are canceled since we put up our article. The way you overcome that is, what is your possible motivation? Because look, when it comes to tortious interference in contract,
because you're bragging doesn't mean anything. I mean, because you can say, look, yeah, I got voted for an award. This is the best article they've ever seen. Oh, look, my article was so powerful that all these people responded. Is that necessarily going to do it? Again,
I can't even understand how a reasonable jury could possibly come to that. Like, I don't know how you get to trial. And because I don't think a reasonable jury can come to a conclusion that this is not purple. Look, we have to see their answer. You have to see their pleadings and what their explanation is before you can start really getting any sort of conclusion. What I'm saying is this complaint is firing off nuclear bombs at them. And look, maybe they have some sort of Iron Dome defense that they can shoot these out of the air before it comes in, before it manages to get to DC. And they'll definitely be helped if they manage to get it moved to DC or California. But I think that they're really going to struggle because it's so math defying. It's so math defying that you managed to do this, and there's so many steps they had to take in order to get to this. And the articles read as if this is what users get if they go to Twitter, because it's run by these crazy, and that X is run by crazy right-wing people, and that's why if you come here, you're going to end up getting this. That's what they say, and they ignore the fact that there are all these safeguards. They pretend that you don't have to.
Of course they do, but again, if they have two people that did it, that's users, and that's plural. I mean, I'm just more against semantics.
I'm looking at the article right now, and I see they're talking about this and that, and then there's an Xfinity ad. It's like, okay, but how is it that people are so bent out of shape thinking, okay, so now Xfinity is somehow endorsing this exchange between whoever these people are on Twitter talking about whatever they're talking about? Are people so dumb in that regard that they're going to, and businesses and advertisers, they think that there's going to be some sort of correlation here, that this is something that we even need to worry about in the first place? Now, I know it's money, but why should they risk having their consumers believe that they're tolerant of being associated with it? It's like, is it even worth the risk rather than just spending their advertising dollars elsewhere? You know what I'm saying? It's like, it just seems like a lot of effort to cater to stupid people that think there's an endorsement here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That it sucks that that's the reality. But at the end of the day,
but see, this is going back to the what my hopes are, and I think that we need to really break this propaganda mill that has captured the country, which is the incestuous relationship between government, media, academia, and big tech. And this is what he's doing is he's striking at that little conspiracy between, like, we create the news, we report the news, we create the battle space, we shut down opposition, and we create these fake narratives that, for example, conservatives are Nazis. That's the first fake narrative, right? The reason the left is so charged up is because they are so filled with hatred towards anybody who opposes them on the other side. And I'm really hoping to see that, maybe this is a shot across the bow of that. I mean, we really need it because propaganda in this country is overwhelming us. And this is I've even had, neo-Nazi types that in my chats when I'm on Rumble and I'm streaming and I'm just talking, like I talk. And then those people start coming in and they start loading up like, I'm glad you agree with me about the Nazis and stuff. And I ban those people quick because to me, that's a setup. They're trying to create a stream. And then I had somebody say, I don't watch Ghazni anymore because he's a Nazi and all his chats are filled with Nazis. And I'm like, really? That's news to me.
But and if it's thick enough, Steve, you're right.
They fill the chat with all this hatred. And if you're on top of it, then it's like, oh, look, his users are he's this part of this conspiracy. And then it's like, now they report on it. And then they get reported, it gets bounced around and you get slimed. And it's the way to create this narrative that any opposition to the party line, deviation is evil and should be expunged from the system. When it ends up falling on just average people, average folks like you and me, and this Media Matters is one of the core organizations that does it, but it's endemic throughout the left, because they are basically using that as tar and feather their opposition, and it's supported in many ways by the big tech companies. So I'm really happy with it, what Elon's doing. I mean, he's bought Twitter, and he's fighting this lawsuit, and we should all fight that type of rhetoric and lawsuits and conspiracies. I mean, these big companies, then it's like it gives them an excuse to cancel on something like Twitter. It's like, well, we're doing it because we're just too careful, when in fact they're agreeing with the agenda. So
of course they are. And by the way, you bring up a good point, and that's a great way to entrap, especially if there's a ton of comments. There's no way on some of my streams I can keep up with everything that's being said, especially if I'm talking to the audience directly. I just can't. There's just too much. And that's a beautiful setup, because you get somebody who's saying Yahtzee, 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 and they make a couple snide little comments. Then later on, they make a real cogent point. And then you reply, hey, that's a good point, fill in the blank X. Then they've got you. Because earlier they're like, oh, look at that. He's even acknowledging this Yahtzee and saying, hey, congratulations, good point. Really quickly, I want to get through some super chats that have been coming in. Nicholas Stero said, and maybe we'll jump to this one after this. Young Thug RICO trial starts Monday, 6 to 9 months of the trial, probably longer. States witness list 737. Good God. Pokey SD said, no joke, live stream just interrupted by a Tesla ad. Good job on targeting Elon here. Tesla, Elon, I love it. And then Just Me said, it falls under you can't fix stupid, but if you're going to mess with someone with the algorithm, don't do it to the guy who owns the algorithm. Elon is going to make media matters equals media splatters. So thank you all for those. Joe, you're late to this. This tool here is actually Rumble Studio. It's in beta, and it's the reverse situation of YouTube. I could surface comments, but now here I can only surface Rumble comments. So it's the exact opposite, and I have to read out the YouTube comments. And by the way, I saw a Rumble rant came up, and on the top right, I saw it flash up there saying, thank you for your support. That was automatic in the system, which I really love. So it's popping up and doing the rants.
There's probably no way to get your camera to stream to both of them, is there?
What do you mean? I am
StreamYard. Oh, you can stream to StreamYard and Rumble?
Oh, you're talking about doing two simultaneous.
So that way you can pull up both of them.
That's a good idea. Maybe.
I doubt most of the time I find with cameras that when it's busy going toward one type of thing, one type of app thing, like you can't go to Zoom. You can't go to Zoom and StreamYard.
You're on Windows. Right.
Oh, is that what it is? Yeah, I'm in Windows.
Yeah. I can do it on Mac. Anyway.
Sweet.
Ooh,
oh no, you like to trash Mac. You're a snob. That's fine. I bet you're on Android. So hey,
I am.
So enjoy your pride. One thing I don't like is every time somebody turns their camera off, they disappear from the screen, and I don't know if they're actually going to be heard in the background. But I'm taking all kinds of notes while I'm doing this. So who just popped off the screen? Gosney?
Yeah.
Do me a favor. Turn off your camera. No, turn off your camera and talk. I want to know if I hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, like a ghost.
I don't like that.
I heard it, but it was like a ghost.
Yeah, I don't care for that. I'd rather have a marker so people know that you're talking. So this all helps. I'm going to take notes, get back with them. It's a beta. I'm super excited, though, that Rumble is putting this software out. And, I mean, let me know if you agree. If they get this to be at a somewhat parity with StreamYard, would you jump to this and go to Rumble first over?
Yes, I do already. I go to Rumble first, so I would like to do that. I love having options, and I like the quality of these panes, and it seems that it's a little higher quality. There's a lot of things I like, and I like being able to highlight the Rumble rants. Yeah.
I would definitely probably do more Rumble exclusive streams this way for sure. Absolutely. Because it's a pain in the ass to set it up other ways. And so I like this a lot. And I'm wondering if I can get access to the beta, because I'm going to do a Rumble only stream, I think on December 8th. So
maybe they're slowly rolling it out. I'm kind of known as a dog food eater, if you will, for tech. So I sometimes get early, really, really early, and that's why
the
it can be a
thing
little
about we're talking about Rumble is at present, Rumble and X are free speech platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I tend to lean on that, because why build a house on a foundation of sand, and when you have a group that can cancel you for no reason.
See the top right, how that flashed on?
Yeah, it's cool.
So I like that, and then I can always bring up and pin to something as well.
YouTube and Rumble have different things going on for them, and for my personal sphere, like there's more eyes in YouTube, but Rumble gives me the ability to do a lot of things that I can't do on YouTube. So I'm just going to try to use them to the best of my ability right now,
of course,
to what's most advantageous, and hopefully it grows and goes the way of X is right now, where it's continues to be free speech, even though you have 1/5 of the population, you were saying, Joe, is on X.
1/16 of the planet.
1/16 of the planet is
That's
on X. I would love 1/16 of the planet to be on Rumble.
Yeah. No, I would love that too. I kind of wish, and maybe
I'd love for 1/16 of New York City to be on Rumble.
Well, I would love to see Chris Pavlovsky working more directly with Elon Musk, and some of these companies banding together, especially the ones who are behind the wheel, if you will. And why are we on a YouTube platform? I can answer: cash. Sorry, but I got to pay bills. I don't see Joe jumping off of YouTube anytime soon either, because this is my living. And the bottom line is that the money coming from Rumble is a rounding error in comparison to what comes from
that's a good way to put
YouTube. I don't know how else to put it. I get very frustrated by people who are saying, "Oh, you gripe about YouTube," and then you go there and say, "Okay, well, you gripe about Amazon. I bet you buy shit."
This is the difference in money. Okay, this is literally the difference in money. Like what you just said, a rounding number. Mm-hmm. To date, I have not yet collected a single penny from Rumble in my life. Now they have like some money set aside for me, and when I collect that money, that means that I will have had a good month. Like, in other words, it's not like something like there's going to be like 3 months worth of YouTube money that's sitting there. No. Right now, my collection for my year and a half on YouTube is still less than one average month that I've had from YouTube. That's the difference. A year and a half is less than an average month in YouTube. That's you can't. I mean, that's not even comparable. I mean, that's just not comparable. I go to
a lot of it is too. It's where the consumers are. So if you have a choice between the two, support the platform that you want to support.
Sure.
I was for a long time just Rumble exclusive, but then I moved to other because there are people and there are eyeballs, and but yet I'm leaning primarily. My main channel is over on the R channel, but the thing is that ultimately we go where the consumers are, and a lot of people only go or one or the other, but where the consumers. So if you're watch on the platform that you support, and then the market will sort itself out. I really do feel though that the free speech issue for a broadcaster, if you're a content creator, you really need to have a stake in the other free speech areas, because you can look what happened to Megan Fox. She gets blacklisted and shut down with no warning, no comment, nothing. Not even they don't even know why. And I mean, if you're making decent, you start making life choices off of something you're doing. Thank God I'm just a part-timer, because I mean, this is just a hobby for me, and I don't even pay attention to anything regarding dollars are coming in, because that's not why I'm here.
He's here to sell books.
I'm here to sell books. Yeah. Well, it's partially, but I mean, I don't know. It's not my main career. My main career is appeals, and I teach, and then I write books, and then fourth, I actually stream. So But I understand it's tough. If you're a content creator, what is it you should do? Well, you should be an educated consumer as a content creator and as a content consumer.
I will say tools like this, though, and I hope they can really rapidly advance it. If it becomes so convenient that more creators go ahead and use this and then fire to both Rumble and YouTube, especially if they can tie in super chats from both platforms, that will be huge, because the more creators that you like who are on Rumble, the easier it is to say, okay, I'll just watch Rumble. All my favorite creators there. I mean, if we could get to that, 90%, 100% saturation, then that would, I think, tip the scales a bit, where people would go over and just say, yeah, I just watch Rumble. Everybody likes over there anyway. And then more ads will follow because, hey, we've got, some like-minded, creators there. And that's another issue, is like, Rumble, please find more mattresses or pillow guys or whatever. There's got to be ads or advertisers who wish to be on Rumble, because that's a big problem. When it comes to rants, I do get some money from rants, but the ads are just the biggest, laughable joke of all. I don't know if I've gotten $100 for a year or something. It's just so small. And then before you say, well, what about Russell Brand? What about Glenn Greenwald? What about Viva Fry? What about Nick Rekieta? They all have a contract with Rumble, and they are paid directly by Rumble. So correct me if I'm wrong. Everyone who makes money on Rumble pretty much is being paid directly by
anyone
Rumble.
who lives off of Rumble. Anyone who makes enough to live off Rumble. Yeah.
From the consumer standpoint, because I do watch people on Rumble. Just before this, I was over watching Viva Fry. I'm not a huge fan of the interface.
No.
And I think that limits people's watching from there. And therefore, then it limits the potential ad revenue that they could get. And therefore, it limits the creators' ad revenue. And I think, honestly, it all comes down to the usability of the app. I think they need to address that a little bit more first. They can have all this cool tech stuff. They can say free speech.
Well, let's see. This is your beta. Review of it. What is your review so far, Eric? I don't feel, as somebody who's playing here, it doesn't feel much different than StreamYard.
Okay. Well, my review right now, because this show has far fewer viewers than America's Untold Story, as an example, and I don't have a ton of super chats coming in. Yeah. That's why I'm doing this for a small channel, just starting out or whatever, or not having a ton of numbers. This is great. And this is a relaxed show. People are very kind and indulgent, etc. I like it, but it's definitely a beta. Just somebody hit turn off your camera.
Yeah.
One of you, just turn it off.
That's the weird. Can you guys hear me still?
I just tried.
Yep, I can. So
that's
you disappear and you come back. And so these little glitches, I also don't like that. Why do I have to be wide? And now Steven on the bottom, both Steves are small. I want it to be consistent and come up with a pattern. And obviously I'll point to StreamYard.
Listen to Varish. If you want equality, you go to YouTube. Here on Rumble, you can be large and in charge.
Yeah, well, there you go. Exactly. You can look at my big head.
Customization of the presentation and the panel would be nice.
Right. So, but they've got to get there. There's no private chat, by the way. So I can't sit there and send a message to you and say, hey, blah, blah, blah. Or if somebody can't say, hey, I got to go. I got to get a phone call. Sorry, be right back. None of that private chat's not there. I can't respond to the Rumble chat. I love that I can bring this up. I could pin this guy's comment. I don't care for the fact it overlays people, because that means, Joe's being covered a little. But, that'll get there. But I can't respond to the chat. I have to actually go to a Rumble window. If like somebody made a comment, I just wanted on the slide say, yeah, I hear you. I can't sit here and type into this and do it. Obviously, YouTube, they're having to do RTMP to YouTube, so that's preventing me from pulling up anything there.
So this is the thing. Neither side plays well together. StreamYard doesn't play well with Rumble, and now this app's not playing well with the YouTube. So it's kind of like, pick your poison, right?
Right, but I don't want that. This isn't a video game. I don't wish to be exclusive on Xbox or exclusive. It's like I want the widest possible audience.
The widest possible audience? Well, that's pretty racist.
Well, exactly. Anyway.
I thought he meant Miss Nepal. So
enunciation, the widest
audience.
I'm going to sue you.
I'm sure
I'm
you
gonna
will.
post that. We're gonna clip
It's like
that.
VHS and Betamax back in the 80s. I see that in the chat. Yeah, that's exactly what
Betamax
this
was
is.
better, actually, a better format than VHS.
Yeah, but you know what they didn't
I
do?
don't know.
Warren.
They didn't allow porn. And it
Well,
killed
there
them.
you go. That's the end of it.
If you want to build the internet. Anyway, here we
Well,
go.
there you go,
Nobody
Eric.
cares
That's
about your
Tony's
interface. If your content's great, it doesn't matter. That is true to a degree. But again, if it's too difficult for people to get to the content or they feel it's aggravating, that is a huge, huge factor.
And
I can't
also,
argue.
You guys may not notice it for watching it, but a crappy interface it'll drive you up the wall if you're operating it. So it does.
Well, right now, if Eric wanted to present a news story, you're not going to see any of us. You can
we all
probably hear
disappear.
us, but only.
Oh, yeah,
only
that's
Eric's going to be on the panel.
yeah, which I completely don't like at all. And I tested earlier. I even stopped sharing the window because I'm not going to shove everybody in the background. This is really weird. Now, really quick, 2 more super chats. Entry required says some of us are retired on fixed income and are no longer big pants people, but do our best to support the creators. And Mr. Entry required absolutely does. A great supporter of multiple shows. And then Debbie O is saying this is a fascinating tech lesson. Got any more law today? So I am going to blame Dave for this distraction. So now, Dave, you'll have to introduce what is the next case. Anything going on with Crumblies? Anything going on your neck of the woods?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to do a stream on the Crumblies. They're kind of it's interesting dynamics that's been going on. So if you're not familiar, these are the parents of the Oxford School pewer that have been charged in connection with that unaliving of those kids. But their case has been pending for like 2 years. It worked its way up through the Court of Appeals, the Michigan Supreme Court. Now it's back down in the trial court, and all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Apparently there's surprise witnesses out of Florida that's caused a rift between the parties, so they bifurcated their case. Now apparently there's allegations that one of the defense attorneys, Jennifer's defense attorney, had mishandled some evidence and might be facing contempt proceedings. And as the news media says, she might go to jail with her client. And so there's all kinds of stuff going on with that right now. But as it's still planned, one of them is going to trial January 23rd. So I'm really interested in watching that. So that's going to be starting January 23rd. But the other interesting thing is that Ethan Crumbley, the child, had a Miller hearing last month, and the state was on the exact opposite position in that case with Ethan than they're going to be with the parents. They were putting it 100% on Ethan, and they said the parents didn't have any knowledge of these things and this and that, but they're going to be essentially alleging that the parents had knowledge and didn't take appropriate steps to intervene, and therefore they're guilty of involuntary manslaughter because of the intentional wrongful acts of their son. So that's where we are right now. And the case is just devolving into mudslinging between the state and the two defense parties, the two defendants. So there's some really interesting developments there. That's what I got on the Crumblies.
So that's interesting that the point about inconsistent positions by the state, because that's Chad Daybell has filed a motion on that saying that the state had previously said Lori was the ringleader of this. And so you can't now say that he is, right? And right. They're also saying you shouldn't be able to go to the death penalty for him because you didn't for her. But they're saying the state should be limited to consistent positions. So I think I think your discussion of proximate cause in that case is really something people need to listen to if they have any interest in this case.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to do one about the proximate causation issue, because essentially you have a third party being charged criminally for the intentional wrongful acts of another, and Eric disappeared. I don't know where he went.
That's what I was looking around for.
Turned his camera off. But the other thing I was going to say is it's not even like it was the same prosecutor's office that made the argument in Ethan's case. It was the exact same prosecutor, the elected prosecutor. So you can't even say it was like, well, that was the office, that was what this other, assistant prosecutor. It's the exact same person that's heading up the prosecution in the courtroom on both cases.
Personally, I don't think
they're going to have a hard time with that.
Personally, I mean, yeah, it does make it that much more galling, that it's the same prosecutor. But I think that seeing as how the Justice Department is supposed to be purely seeking justice and not seeking out its own stake, meaning you sort of understand the perspective of a litigant being able to argue, at least certainly in civil court, a defendant can argue incompatible pleadings. That's
in the alternatives.
And we list it as in the alternative, and you can basically say if you're sued for a vase, that you borrowed and that the complaint alleges that you borrowed and broke, you can say I never borrowed it and you sold it to me and I never possessed it and it was broken when you gave it to me and I gave it back to you perfectly. And that's a perfectly fine pleading that you can put in your pleadings, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And you plead in the alternative this, in the alternative that. And it sounds insane that a defendant should be able to do that. And the reason we do that is we recognize that every individual, every citizen has a right to basically present their perspectives and look out for their own pure interests. And they're not seeking justice. They're seeking what's best for them. And our litigation process is basically two different parties who are seeking what's best for them and trying to convince the court as to what justice is. So that's why a litigant can make inconsistent pleadings, at least my understanding philosophically. That's why we allow that type of approach that is very different from the position of the state, because the state is not an entity unto itself that's looking out for its own personal interest. It's purely designed, at least romanticized historically, although based on the way District Attorneys act, seemingly rarely acting in this fashion, but they're designed to be seeking out justice. And it's impossible for justice to be that. In this case, we're going to claim you're the ringleader and you're the person who's behind everything, the driving force. And in the next case, when we're going after a different defendant, that we're going to have an incompatible pleading. And that's why I don't think that they should be allowed that same latitude that we give every citizen. That's my philosophical perspective on it. But I'd love to hear takes from you guys on it.
Well, I have to agree with everything you just said.
Oh, no, that works.
Yeah, no, I agree that the state shouldn't be given the same latitude to be able to plead in the alternative like that. It wasn't even like during the Ethan Crumley's Miller hearing, it wasn't even like, well, we're not sure if the parents knew. It didn't really matter if the parents knew because he still was the bad actor. It was definitively like they didn't know. This was 100% him. And that's why I have a problem with it.
And you would think that they didn't even have to take that position in the first place. Meaning, no. they could have actually said, yeah, the parents were involved, but ultimately he pulled the trigger, and there are 4 dead people now. So,
yeah, they did.
As a parallel case, we have one right here locally with me. A mother, I guess she got sentenced because of the 6-year-old who shot his teacher. Using the gun. Do you guys have any thoughts on that one? Because the two cases were really kind of close to each other in some ways, and it seems like there was parallels in the whole charging of the parents for what's going on. Can somebody give me a difference between the two? Why the parents in Ethan Crumley's maybe should not be versus the mother who has been convicted, or I don't know if she pled guilty.
Oh no, she got 21 months in prison.
Right.
So what did she? What was the charge against her?
Well, she was. It was lying on 4473 that she was a drug user, and she basically took the fall because Hunter Biden was getting charged. But she pled guilty to not murder charges or manslaughter charges or assault with a deadly weapon. Yeah. So she with the Crumley parents, if they wanted to charge them with, say, contributing to the delinquency of a minor or some other related, felony that they possibly could have been guilty of, fine. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to charge them with the wrongful deaths of 4 people that they didn't actually, they weren't actually involved in. Yeah. I have a hard time with that idea. Now, again, there might be they could have charged the Crumbleys with, some other crime that they're actually guilty of, or like this woman for lying on a form or having the gun illegally or anything like that.
No problem with that. I have a problem with charging people for the intentional wrongful acts of another. There's a case in Michigan that sort of sets up that everyone is using. And it's a case where a guy had locked his like a 2 and a 4-year-old or something like that, in a room unsupervised for like hours on end. And in the closet in that room happened to be a loaded firearm.
Ooh.
And so they convicted the guy of essentially involuntary manslaughter. But I think those facts are distinguishable enough. And also, one bad case shouldn't make a whole precedent that we're just going to run with this on.
Oh, by the way, the mother is Deja Taylor. People are asking, what is the case? And is Rich Neck Elementary School, I believe, in Newport News. So Deja Taylor is the person convicted, and the incident took place at Rich Neck.
But I think the main thing is what Dave was saying is so she's pled guilty or whatever she did. The 2 charges I think that she had, those are for her acts and not the injury to the teacher. And in the Crumley case, the parents are being charged for the ultimate result, the deaths of these people, and not something else, say safe storage violation or firearm form or something like that. So the cases were approached very differently. And that's why I think it's the difference between the Crumley case. They're just not the same kind of cases at all, because it was handled, I think, appropriately, probably in Virginia. And with the Crumley case, probably not. I don't think they have a safe storage law there, so they just jumped to this manslaughter. Maybe that's what they were doing, but they could.
Why not the staff? That's always pissed me off. Why is it that we're going to go right after the parents when they're not the professionals? The kid was in the office with a weapon in his bag, and the school administration did not have the ability to call the police to check the bag or check the bag themselves or demand that the bag be checked. They knew that there was a problem. They knew there was a threat. The kid was going into the office for an obvious reason because of the crazy artwork, but they didn't do anything, and they're just blaming the parents. That's kind of pissed me off.
Not only did they have the ability, it was part of their school like handbook and policies that they would do this. Yeah, and so they still didn't do that. There were several lawsuits that were filed that all got kicked on government immunity. But so all that was kind of brought to light in those lawsuits. So not only did they have the ability, it was in their policy manuals to do such a thing, and they didn't do that.
Well, Joe took off. I have the answer in Florida. I have to qualify my comments, right? And I posted the case law in the chat. Is the defendant may argue inconsistent theories to the jury so long as proof of one does not necessarily disprove the other. And Joe was also correct that the state cannot take inconsistent positions regarding multiple defendants, and they are enjoined from doing so. And it's appellate error, to allow that to be done. So yes, there are 2 sets of rules that apply. Individual defendants have protections the state does not. That's why we have a constitution that protects individual rights. So, and I get this. In fact, it's one of those articles waiting to be written in my bag of tricks. That is that the state. We have a prosecutor, a death penalty prosecutor, who is pretty good, but likes to say the state's entitled to rights too. The state's entitled to a fair trial too, and they've got all these things. And the answer to that is absolutely not. The state does not have rights. The state has statute that has powers and statutory enabling events, but the state doesn't have a right to remain silent. The state doesn't have a right to anything. The rights are to protect individual citizens. The whole idea of the beyond the reasonable doubt standard is an unfair standard when applied to the state. But yet it exists because we protect individual citizens. And the prosecutors really need to get it through their heads that the Constitution protects citizens, and they are not entitled to a fair trial. They're entitled to a trial that is properly, that is within the bounds of the law, but the law does not give the state rights. It's a little bit of a rant, but Joe got me off on that because what the defense can do, the state cannot. And this is a good example.
No, I am going to I'm going to take your case that you just cited, and I'm going to see if there's something consistent in Michigan, because I don't know. I haven't researched that. And if there is, one way or the other, maybe, Steve, you want to come on and talk about it.
Yes, in fact, I will. I was looking for the case because if I'm not at work and I don't have access to all of my fancy little tools, but I also have the companion state case that says the state cannot argue inconsistent theories from defendant. And I don't have that right at my fingertips, but I brought up that case because that was a question that Joe brought. It's a very good question, by the way. It's a very good question, but sadly, a lot of times there's not a lot of communication between defense attorneys, and they don't really know what's going on in the courtroom next door. And so if you have a case with multiple defendants, it's a good idea to pay attention to what the state is arguing, communicate with your fellow defense attorneys, because as a defense attorney, you represent individuals. So you don't know what's going on in the world. The prosecutors have the whole gamut. They're doing the whole the umbrella of all prosecutions. There's no private prosecutions except in 3 counties of Mississippi.
Well, at least in this case, you have the son and the parents are all the 3 defendants. And so everyone's kind of watching everything closely. Plus, it's a novel case. But yeah, I mean, if you're not watching what the other defense is doing, you might not know that. And everything is so far has been broadcast out there. So it's kind of easy to keep an eye on things. It's luckily enough for that particular case. But no, it's just, I don't like the case at all. I don't like the way it's being framed. I don't like the way it's being brought. I don't like that it is being brought.
But see, as is typical, this is how we lose our rights gradually over time, because you have a very bloody, vicious fact pattern, and that the prosecutor can wave in front of people and say, "Justice for Mary," right?
Oh, you're fine with child killers, huh? Okay,
right.
Fine with school shootings. Yeah, it's
and
perfect.
so, it's like that. Sometimes what happens. Crime is a bad thing happens, and the state does something bad back. Well, sometimes the perpetrator's gone or not available, not subject to punishment, right? Like the mass shooter. So we got to blame somebody because somebody died. Somebody has to pay. And
that was like charging that security guard in that other school pew-pewing.
Well, I don't know all the facts. Yeah, that's
the Florida Parkland.
Well, yeah. I don't know. There's a problem with governmental immunity generally, and the fact is that what we learned is the cop doesn't have a duty to protect your kid at all, nor does the school.
Right.
So
that's what I argued.
It's a good argument for homeschooling, isn't it? Get your kid out of the prison zone that they capture your kid, put him in a little prison cell, and then don't protect him. And then if something happens, you can't do anything about it. What kind of system is that? I say homeschool your children.
But we have a criminal statute in this state for failure to discharge duty if you're an officer and it results in an injury to the public. So we do have something like that.
Nice. I can sort of see the other side a little bit on that, because if there's like 5 things going on, then you've got a trolley car situation. Do you blame the cops when they miss the one because they're busy on the other? I can understand both sides.
Except that both sides don't get hurt. It gets shut down because of governmental immunities. So you never get both sides. It's basically favoring one. I really, justice really has to come at the individual level in the individual case. And making these broad assertions that apply to all things is difficult, but that's the job of the legislature. And then we lawyers fight it out in courtrooms over individual cases. And that's how the common law develops.
Okay, entry required. Send in a super chat on that, which may be related. Why are people that falsely accuse others of the R word not sentenced to the same time as the crime alleged? Bearing false witness is millennium old in Western civilization. I would like thoughts.
So at least in Michigan and federally, as far as I understand it, there's a thing called judicial immunity that applies also to witnesses that are making statements within the course of judicial process. And it's my understanding, and I kind of agree with this, that the reason behind it is they don't want a chilling effect on people going to the state and going to the courts to exercise and redress their issues. Otherwise, so if you're liable for making a false accusation, at the end of the day, people are going to make less and less accusations, period, and they're going to resort to street justice, that kind of thing.
Which do you prefer, though? Do you prefer more accusations and innocent people put away, or fewer accusations, that gets into that question of how many innocent people get convicted just because we want to make sure we convict as many as possible. Isn't this the same argument?
Well, you can't have perjury, and you can have filing a report,
Yeah.
a false police report, and stuff like that. And the idea of putting somebody in jail for the same time as the person who would have been convicted
Maybe
of
not
the crime,
that, but they should be convicted of something.
if you could prove it, right? And so that's going to be an issue too. Is just because the state decides a person story wasn't credible doesn't mean they'll be able to prove in court beyond a reasonable doubt.
Okay, well, what about Trevor Bauer? I'll name a specific case. Trevor Bauer, the case got laughably thrown out. She showed the intention of going in there, stating about getting the money, set him up. There's track records, there's receipts, everything else. Should there not be people convicted? I don't care if it's 6 months community service. Should there not be some sort of a penalty? And I feel the same way about doxing. I feel the same way about swatting. I feel that a lot of these things that people are doing are weaponized because there is no recourse, because there are no consequences. They could just flat out do it. They can just falsely accuse, and nobody's going to do anything because you know what? It could have been a real accusation. It's like, yeah, but you knew it wasn't a real accusation. You did.
Well, I'm going to go back to the system is not the issue. It's the people in the system. Okay, it's the people in the system. For example, small stakes case I had, malicious use of a communication device. I just got it dismissed on Wednesday. The accusation is that my client was sending hostile, threatening, intimidating text messages to a woman. She told him to stop. He continued, and he's being charged. Now, I went through all of the text message communications, not the 8 or 10 that were contained in the police report that were cherry picked, that the prosecutor signed off on. And I went to him with 1,700 text messages and said, okay, here's the parties communicating. Let's go through this. And he's like, give me the highlights, right? I gave him the highlights, and he's like, okay, I'm going to dismiss this. The problem is they shouldn't have been brought in the first place. Me looking at what was initially in the police report in those clearly, obviously cherry-picked text messages, as a prosecutor, I would say I kind of need a little more context before I bring this case, before I sign off on these charges. So the system is fine. We have the perjury. We have the lying on a police report, making a false police report. It's the people in the system that makes the system screwed up. So do you want more of an elaborate system in order to check the system, or should we focus on the people that are actually in the system? And that's what I'm kind of gearing for. Let's get quality people in there. Let's put the pressure on the people that are in the system to do the right thing.
Yes, and thank you, Aunt Debbie, by the way. Wow, $50 Rumble rant. Incredible.
Aunt Debbie, way better than Little Debbie.
Yeah, no kidding. Way better. And by the way, that's another suggestion I'll have for Rumble. I love that it acknowledged it at the top, but I would like it when I pin it to show people that, hey, this person donated money and, they really are supporting the channel, to where it looks different than other chats that are.
If you,
pinned,
just curious, you pulled up Aunt Debbie's. If you pulled up SNG just above it, does it look exactly the same?
It does.
Notice.
Yeah, you can see.
Yeah,
because
that's not good.
Well, because they flagged it, though. To their credit, they flagged it as soon as it came in. So there's an acknowledgement there, but it went kind of fast. And I want people to know, it's like it's stamped on the screen for a little bit saying, hey, they donated some money. Thank you very much. Anyway, these are all things that I'll report back. I'm notorious for.
I'd be curious to hear what the Steves have to say about my position on that. I mean, again, I think the system is great. It's the people in the system.
No, I agree 100% that the population is, we are going to get the system that's reflected by the population, no matter how perfect we design any system. If the people in it are flawed and not following what the system designed, they're going to corrupt it. And I really found, in writing Prepare, that the Judeo-Christian ethics that this country was founded on are required for individual freedom. That when we move away from the Judeo-Christian moral framework, that we are going to lose individual freedom. And I was surprised by that, because obviously I place great value on individual freedom, and I'm a latecomer. I'm a Catholic convert. And the fact when I discovered that was true based on the ideas that I explored in that book, it was kind of shocking. And so therefore I really put a lot of my effort into faith and getting people to talk about faith and getting to talk about morality, because that to me is how we save the country. It's not through intellectual debate necessarily or rational debate. It's through moral debate. It's through moral discussion and calling on each other to be better as individual human beings through Judeo-Christian mindset.
Hey, judging. We need a little judging. I hate to, but from the community and our friends. Like sometimes we maybe need to be a little judgmental of a friend. Maybe we need to say, hey, what are you doing there?
So there is a lot of immunity there on the civil side if somebody goes to the police about something like what Dave was saying. And I think that's appropriate because you don't want to have this chilling effect. But law enforcement does have, which we both have mentioned, some tools there if the person has lied about it or is perjuring themselves or filing a false report. So my view is if that's occurring, if they're not willing to use those tools there, what's the point of having a law to increase the penalty for the thing, right? So so in terms of having the best actors, say on the state side, the DA side, to exercise the right kind of discretion for the charges they do bring, to be willing to downgrade or get rid of charges when that's warranted by the facts that they have, that's your best gatekeeper right there, than to make more rules. And then if you do find a malicious case, be willing to do something about it, because that message needs to get out there too, that you're not free to ruin somebody's life by engaging the criminal justice system to wreck somebody when there's nothing behind it. It's just a tool that you're exploiting.
And it all comes down to, as Steve was just saying, you're going to have to convince that prosecutor, I'm going to prosecute this woman because all that it turns out, or, this false accuser of something. And then it easily looks like, and part of the issue is worried about chilling. There's that chilling effect, but it's also because people, in general, like the public is stupid. They're like, oh, well, if I'm wrong, if it turns out I was mistaken. No, it's because these people are lying and they're being malicious. But we have to account for the fact they don't understand that. They can't fathom that difference, that contextualization. So they're just like, oh, I better not report, period.
Yeah,
and then
it
turns into, I understand. But then that turns into, as if you're the elected official, you're like, well, God, if I do this, then all these morons are going to think I'm throwing victims in jail. So that's where, there's that secondary issue of the public is full of stupid people. So you have to kind of navigate around that matter.
But there's only one victim here. First off, it's an accuser, not a victim. Because the person who's accusing, who is lying, is not a victim. They're an accuser and they're lying. The victim is the person who has been accused and has their reputation smeared. They can't get that back. And I'll tell you what, it might help a little bit if it's like, not only am I not guilty, but the SOB who accused me got locked up. That does help reframe the conversation. It does help change it, rather than the whole, oh, you just got off. We know that you're really a scumbag who did that because you were accused of it. You got lucky. You had a good lawyer, whatever, 1,000 things, but your reputation is smeared for life. If a false accuser gets convicted, there is some degree of recourse to a reputation of the victim, in my opinion.
Oh, I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying how the public would portray it in general.
But even if, like, I what you just said leads me back to Rittenhouse. Like, he was acquitted, but there's so many people out there that still say
the morons
that he pew-pewed 3 black people, or just insanity. And it's like, how do you deal with that if you don't attack it at its source? You got to attack it at its source, and it's the people, it's the society that we're living in. It's whatever system, like Steve said, Steve Gosney. Whatever system we have, it's going to reflect the society and the people that are engaging in that system.
But I will also can I
go to that root source.
I'm on the chat is having a little discussion too, and push back a little bit against the idea that stupid people are the problem. Okay, and I know that's sort of yes, there are problems. I mean, obviously our criminal justice system's overrepresented, but they are also vulnerable to police work, and they have closer encounters because generally they're poor, incapable of supporting. That's a whole nother problem. But I think it's a mistake to identify intelligence with morality. That is a huge mistake. I think that some of the damages that are done by our so-called elites from the Ivy Leagues are much more destructive to our freedoms than a boatload of my poor criminals who are trespassing and spitting on the sidewalk and get 14 days in jail every day at first appearances. I mean, to me, the ship of state, those people, they may be intelligent, raw intelligence, smart, but they are immoral. They are not operating in accordance with morality. And that is the problem with our country, is that the morality has been sucked away from our government, from our leadership. We are not operating in accordance with a moral guidance. Instead, it becomes a what can I have? False idols and misdirection. So I just want to, let's not confuse intelligence with morality.
Also, there's stupid and there's ill-informed.
Well,
because there's that too. Because somebody would say, yeah, and all they know is what's been fed to them. So again, we have the same case. Somebody's falsely accused. All the headlines are that they were accused. If they are proven that the accuser is false or whatever, the headlines might be, oh, they're acquitted. It's not they were lied about. That's a very significant factor that needs to come back in. And I don't blame people who have a job and they don't have time to parse everything and figure it all out. They're only going to be able to see what's given to them. The second story is very important, and that's the other thing. And sorry again, I hate this so much. It's like a newspaper can put out a story that's just horrible and malicious, and then the retractions on page 30. And nobody actually sees the retraction. It should be the same place as the story. So if it's a frontline headline story, the retraction should be front page headline story above the fold. That's just my opinion.
The other thing,
I agree.
The other thing I wanted to put out about the retaliation, like against the accuser, right? And I'm going to go back to my example from last week. My again, small stakes, right? But still, at the end of the day, there's ancillary cases involving these two people. Let's just say there's other stuff going on, other cases involved. Now, you can say that the accusation of the criminal nature was used to manipulate the other thing. But once the thing gets dismissed, my client probably and rightfully doesn't want to pursue any sort of wrongful accusation thing, because it's just going to cause more headache and strife in those ancillary cases. So we're going to let it drop. And so not everything, not criminalizing everything and throwing people in jail and charging them with absolutely everything is also the right approach. Sometimes it's right to let things go sometimes and focus on bigger deals. So just because they don't follow up with these things doesn't mean
but
it's
the same way as
thing.
If somebody commits a crime against me or whatever, I can say I don't want to press charges, but the state determines they're going to press it any damn way. So it's not necessarily up to that person. And who knows, the punishment may or may not be public. When you say revenge, I don't necessarily feel like it's a revenge rather than a justice. If you are going to lie for the purposes of harming somebody else, you should have consequences. Period. It should not be I lie in a way that I know that's fine because we don't want to do this with the other. No, bullshit. There should be consequences.
I did a case. I covered a case on my Innocent Project Day stream. The first exoneration due to DNA was a gentleman from 1978 that was wrongfully accused of rape. And the woman, after his conviction, like a year later or 2 years later, like fairly soon, said, no, I'm going to recant. It was, in fact, I had a boyfriend and I didn't want my parents to find out. And I made this all up. And so they eventually set aside, kind of sort of went back and forth. He was eventually exonerated by the governor. The governor commuted his sentence, and then he was exonerated by DNA. Should that woman be charged? Because the defendant and the accuser are now friends and everything's fine, and they did this huge media campaign and actually launched the exoneration program. Should she be charged?
Possibly.
Yes. Examples must be made. We are not going to tolerate this. You want to steal someone's life, great, he's happy he's out. I can't imagine how much that guy's life was destroyed. There needs to be an example that has to be made sometime.
Well, here's a
purpose of enforcing law.
And I know the flip side though is, okay, well, will an accuser ever come forward to recant their testimony if they know they're going to sit down the river? So so you'll have to negotiate some of this, but there still has to be consequences that makes it worth negotiating one way or another, and they can make the determination.
Remember the Duke Lacrosse case?
Yeah.
So you had that, and she lied, and then we're trying to write a book about it. So she wasn't punished for that. And how did that work out?
Well, she's in prison now for killing somebody. So
exactly, she murdered somebody. So it would have maybe been nice if she'd gotten some corrective action.
I guess the one thing I wanted to say though is the idea of stupid people. It's not people who are unintelligent, but the willful ignorance of people. And I understand people have lives and jobs, but just it's on TV. Okay, Kyle Rittenhouse murdered 3 black people. Like, okay, at some point, your morality is reflected in your ignorance. That good enough for me. I don't care.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that the poor and ignorant are morally better. I'm just saying that morality is different than intelligence.
Well, I agree, but I think there is some. It turns into, why do people still think Kyle Rittenhouse murdered 3 black people, or all of this happened? And I think at some point, this idea of this, we can't, for the Innocence Project. I remember you talking about this, David. Well, if people look at that and they say, "Oh my gosh, if it turns out I'm mistaken, I go to jail." Well, no, actually read about what happened. If you are lying intentionally, and I mean, at this point, we only see people getting arrested or charged when they go, like, I made it all up. I knew it all along. Ha, 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 ha. I don't care.
Right.
That example has to be made. We will not tolerate this.
Mistaken identity is not what we're talking about. Where somebody goes,
and that's where
I really thought it was him. I'm looking at it now, and I realize that no.
I was mistaken.
It was that's different. I mean, it's all about intent, in my opinion. If you're, we'll go back to Trevor Bauer. If you're doing something here that is going to get money or get this or get that, or you could see a definitive, go after them first, and to definitely at least get the egregious ones.
This
can we agree on that? Go after the egregious ones.
You see,
borderlines.
Here's the problem. We're all discussing this as consumers or of prosecutorial product, right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the prosecutors are the ones that are empowered to make these calls and decisions. Mm-hmm. And this is a flaw in the system, because the prosecutor office gets loaded up with human beings, like back to the flawed human beings. And those people have their own agendas, their own biases, their own. And I was reminded, I pulled this out because I was reminded of this case, in a case in point, an example that I made. It was all from our office itself, involving the death penalty. And the prosecutors like to say, well, we prosecute people, we put them to death because that's what the family wants, right? We're representing the family of the grieving victim. All right, well, I will say this, indulge me for a second. In months leading up to a trial, a death penalty trial, the entirety of the victim's family begged the state attorney's office not to seek the death penalty. The prosecutor sought death anyways. The family continued to beg for life sentence after our client was convicted, and the state office continued to ignore their impassioned pleas for mercy. The prosecutor successfully prevented the jury from ever hearing the family's wishes. So the fact that, we're on the side of the family until they disagree with us, and then we're going to shut them up and keep them from talking to the judge or the jury. So ultimately, the system we have empowers this office of police. And so we need to be cognizant that all of our expressions and our wills are getting funneled into a system that's populated by flawed individuals.
Okay, well, we're not going to.
They did that in that lesbian murder case a few months back. Well, on the woman's 4th trial, they didn't even call the party's daughter to do a victim impact statement. The prosecutors didn't. They didn't see her as a victim, and so the defense called the daughter of the murdered woman, who happened to be the daughter also of the defendant, and that was just shameful.
Well, we tried to call the family to speak to the jury, because if the state gets to put on victim impact statement to seek death, we tried to put on the victims' families and the victims and the family to put on to argue for life, and the state shut us down, filed a motion to exclude that, and was successful. So we didn't even get to argue, put in the wishes of the family that was unanimous against death.
All right. I hate to do this. We're not going to wrap it up today, but I'm definitely running behind on point here.
Just have so much more to say.
I know. And it's like, it was a great conversation. And I kind of want to continue it next week for sure. So folks, subscribe. So this may come back up. Entry required.
Tell your friends too. We have 1,300 people watching right now. More people need to see this sort of conduct or conversation in order to fix the system. You need to tell your friends about this show in particular. Don't even tell them about me. Tell them about this show.
Tell them
every
about
Friday.
you too. Everybody here deserves that. And it's not only 1,300 there. There's 266 that are watching on Rumble right now. It appears that X cut off at a time, so I got to figure out what happened on that situation. But definitely appreciate it. Entry required said, way to go, Eric. You're on point. My favorite comment of the day. And Just Me said, just like the lady said in Bad Boys 2, and you too, MFers, need Jesus. Not judging, just saying. And then entry required with one last super chat. Universities are fiefdoms. Why? Grape and whatever is PC to call it are criminal offenses. And in my opinion, criminal offenses that should be dealt with by the police and the courts. Tell me why I'm wrong. There's a lot there. I don't think we're going to be going into that one. Agree that universities are fiefdoms. Would love to see that go. But Dave, making law simple, Michigan Law School, something or another, the man of many names and channels. What do you have coming up?
Yeah, so I have no trial streams coming up that I'm aware of. Usually those pop in last minute, but I do have every Tuesday and Saturday at noon Eastern. I cover the Jodi Arias case. We're doing a rewatch of that. It's highly entertaining, and maybe you'll learn something or two. But that'll be tomorrow, Saturday. That'll continue. And then I will be doing a Crumbly update. I have a couple of other streams, but I'm trying to push my Thanksgiving stream. I did a Thanksgiving stream. I pre-recorded it and I launched it yesterday morning at 9 a.m. I'm hoping more eyes will see it because it's the real story and the important part of the story for me, in that the pilgrims that came over, it wasn't just them. There were other people that came over with them, non-churchgoers, and they established the first truly civil self-government political organization in North America. And I really think that's a good story that a lot of people don't hear about.
Are you talking about Pilgrims? You're talking about Jamestown, which pre-existed the Pilgrims by about 20 years.
No, the Pilgrims, because Jamestown was under the settled colony under the king. The Pilgrims were not. They were outside of the Virginia colony. So therefore, literally no laws applied to them. And they created, for the first time ever, government by the people. And so that's the story that I tell in my Thanksgiving stream. It's only 15 minutes. Give it a watch. Tell your friends. It's I find it interesting.
Cool. Steve Gosney.
Hello. Well, I'll be streaming tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to continue my Thanksgiving stream that got shut down kind of randomly. We had an internet outage. So I'm going to do a Thanksgiving stream continued. And I would really love for everybody, if they want to get my books, my children's book, Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog, has the values. It's a beautiful full color, available only from me. There's Brucey at stevegosney.com. And love it. It's a great Christmas gift for the parents, the children, grandchildren. Have a little values, have a little morality. Don't support the big guy, support the little guy. And of course, there's tons of other books like Prepare and Death Penalty Debates and all these different things. So please come over, and I'll hope to see you tonight at my Thanksgiving stream. Thank you for having me on, Eric.
Hey, I love having all of you on. Definitely. Steve, Southern Law.
So I'm going to do it tomorrow afternoon at 5, weekly docket update. Take a look at Daryl Brooks with the transcript in, what's up with his appeal. Back out a little bit and talk about the law in the Richard Allen case and the Sixth Amendment, something Sean and I were talking about. Chad Dorman's got some simple requests. He doesn't want to look bad. And some other criminal cases too to look at. So what in the heck happened last week? What Brian Koberger, the judge, making a reasonable argument there on cameras. We didn't get to that today. I'll cover it tomorrow, and that's it.
Sean, potentially criminal.
I got nothing big this week. Had some videos set to release, so just hang tight. They'll be coming out, and enjoy them as I put them out there.
All right.
Coming up.
All right, 5:30 today for America's Untold Stories. Probably going to be leaning a little bit more into JFK for the Freeform Friday. It's a big week on the JFK front, so if you're interested in that kind of thing, America's Untold Stories, we're going to kind of continue. We did a Q&A on Tuesday. We released an Oswald AI project on Wednesday for locals only, and we're doing a bit more probably on JFK today, and with a little bit of current news. So hope to see you there, and if you like this kind of content, it's every Friday at noon, one way or another. Don't know what the technology will be. Don't know where it's going to be going out, but consider subscribing or following or whatever platform you're on. Love having you watch it. And we'll see you next week.
Steve Leto.